Ramanatara happened? When did Ramavatara happen? We get into trouble. There is no unique answer for that. But were they historical? Yes, they were historical. How do you show that? One thing which comes to our head is the concept that Gyaur Pita. In all through the Vedas, there are celestial bodies. And it is not my interpretation. And this kind of tripartite understanding is the key to our history.
Just like we have, if you want to study physics, we have to refer to physics textbook. So if you want to study about Dharma, then we have to study Dharmashastra. So the name Dharmashastra itself, Shastra is any systematic treatise. So you cannot speak about Dharma, discuss about Dharma without taking into consideration the Dharmashastra.
So I'll start off by giving a brief bio of, starting with Sri Nitin Sridhar. He's a published author and speaker based in Mysuru. He works as a director and chief curator of Indica Center for Moksha Studies, dedicated to create and curate content on Hindu philosophy with a special focus on Vedanta. He has authored 7 books and 1 book chapter dealing with various aspects of Hindu philosophy and practice. His widely acclaimed books include Menstruation Across Cultures, a historical perspective, which examines menstruation notions and practices prevalent in different cultures and religions from across the world. Samanya Dharma, which enunciates upon general tenets of ethics as available in Hindu texts, and Ishopanishad, an English commentary, which freshly examines the philosophical and theological teachings of the text. His latest book is Chatushloki Manusmriti, which is why we are here, an English commentary, which examines the first 4 verses of the Manusmriti. He regularly contributes articles and essays on issues ranging from politics and society to religion, culture, and philosophy to various media platforms, and teaches courses on Indian knowledge systems, subjects at Indica Courses platform. And then we have Professor R. Iyengar, who is our chief guest, is renowned for his contributions to earthquake engineering, random vibrations, mathematical modeling. His latest book is Mahasalilam. I've been to the launch of that, and that's where we actually met. So let's welcome him. And we have Sri Abhinav Agarwal, is the author of Completing Vyasa's Mahabharata, 67 Upakathas for the modern reader, the first popular English retelling of the 67 Upakhyanas from the critical edition. Padma Bhushan Swargiya Vivek Debroy penned the foreword to his book, concluding that the Mahabharata deserves this. He's also the author of a fiction thriller, Predators and Prey, National Award winner, and Padma Shri Vivek Agnihotri described it as a brilliantly plotted, layered, and intriguing novel. In 2018, he edited and self-published his daughter's book, A Year with Mahapuranas. He is a technical editor of an Oracle Press McGraw-Hill book. He is also chief mentor of the Indica Center for Writing, which is a new center they have opened. He holds a bachelor's degree in computer engineering from Mumbai University and is a gold medalist from the IIM Bengaluru postgraduate program in enterprise management. He lives in Bengaluru with his wife and 2 children. So please welcome. And then we have my very good friend and mentor, Dr. Sai Susirla, as executive director of Siddhanta Knowledge Foundation, Chennai, India. He is also director of Mayer's Institute for Indic Knowledge Studies at MIT, Pune. And he has a 20-year-long career in software research and development with multinational corporations in US and India. He was a technical director at NetApp in Bengaluru. He has a PhD in computer science from the University of Utah, Salt Lake City. He has close to 20 research publications and 25 patents in the areas of large-scale data management and analytics. On a different side, he has a deep passion for the Sanskrita language. He has been a long-time volunteer for Sanskrita Bharati and created the online portal sanskritdocuments.org in 1996. His current area of focus is making India's traditional knowledge more accessible and consumable for the younger generation via innovative education and technology. So he believes technology has a big role to play in bridging the gap between traditional and modern education in India. He's also the director of the MIT Institute of Indic Knowledge Studies in Pune for the past 6 years. So with that, we can start our program. I would like to invite Professor Iyengar to please come and address.
To say something about a subject like Manusmriti, which of course the author is the best person to talk about it, not me. But there are also two other speakers, that is Abhinav Agarwal and Dr. Sai Sasula. So, as you would have heard already our talks here, you would have guessed that as an engineer, my interests are elsewhere. But Dharma is common to everyone, whether an engineer or a doctor or whoever it is. And whoever we may be, as Bharatiyas, as Indians, we have some commonality, whichever language we may speak and all that. That commonality is represented generally in the form of Sanskritam as a language. But you may not be a grammarian to know Sanskritam for that. Say a shloka here, Namaste, there's something, that's also Sanskritam. So that takes us to some kind of a feeling of belongingness to a particular culture. And our names are like, is Abhinav, always new things which are happening. And similarly others, Sridhar, I need not explain these things. Our names also carry these things. So it is a cultural unity. And that cultural unity, in English I'm telling you, Sanskrit ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಆಗುವಂಥ ಭಾವನೆ ಮನೋಭಾವನೆ ಅಂತ ಇಟ್ಕೋಬಹುದು. That cultural unity, how it has come to this country becomes a question. Now, it has become fashion to talk about Indian knowledge systems, to talk about education, to talk about national educational plan, and variety of things. Since I am from a university, we day in day out, somebody comes and asks, what is it you are doing in IKS and things like that. And all these things, what I have observed, that people are interested in history, in the past. They somehow do their work today and they carry along their own profession and all that, they are happy with it. But it is not that they are unhappy with their history, certainly not. Very happy with the Ganesh Chaturthi which happened, very happy with the Krishna Jayanti some of us are observing today, and similarly any other thing, Deepavali which is coming all over India we celebrate and like that. And the word generally used is Dharma. These are all the Dharmika acharas and Dharmika sampradaya, Dharmika paddhati, these are the words which are used. So what is Dharma, if you ask, becomes a very difficult thing. But the people who come and talk to us, even in Jain University, CHC, the Center for Ancient History and Culture, they are particular about that word ancient. And if you go to them a little bit more, it is not that they are learned people already. No, many of them are from villages and other places. They will talk about their agricultural practices. And we say that if there is a Sanskrit book called Krishikarashara where the ancient Krishi things were said, they are all happy. Sir, does it say anything about Yavag Male Bharathe Helidara? When does it rain? These are the things which are interested. All these things connect us with our past. So history, in a way you can say, is how today we are as an effect, as a cause. It's a causal effect. If you say if the system is causal system, the past is reflected in our present. And this will of course carry on to the future. So the issue is if you know how we have come today, we can modify our own future so that it can be better for our next generations, for the youngsters who are coming in the future. This is the broad principle which is there. And even Dharmashastra, I am not a Dharmashastra, I have to say that I am not studied formally Dharmashastra, even though Manusmriti here and there. I have come to that. This seems to be the broad picture. This what Hume will call the Samanya Dharma. This is the common Dharma for all Indians. India means including the greater India. People who may be outside, even the NRIs and others, may not be in this country but outside. But when it comes to history, their own worry, when I talk to the students, when I talk to the youngsters who are coming into the university fresh, they say, sir, we know about European history, we know about that Indian history, is it only Mughal history? All these kinds of things come up. And then they will say, somebody will say, no, we had Ramayana, Mahabharata and all that. They are all historical people. Then immediately ask, like what we were discussing previously, the historicity of Mahabharata, historicity of Ramayana. So when Rama Avatara happened, when Krishna Avatara happened, is their question. In other words, they will say, look, okay, Babur, Akbar, Jahangir, or even Chanakya, okay, they are all there, we have internalized that. So it is an internalization of that culture. And that belongingness is what people want to do, as I have seen. And in that, we have a big role to play, including the ancient texts, interpreting the ancient texts, translating them, or presenting them in a systematic way. But that systematic way, should it be how it should be? Should it be like, look, I have said it, I am the most knowledgeable man, so you just take it like that. And then I ಹೇಳಿದೀನಿ ಗುರುಗಳು ಹೇಳಿದಾರಪ್ಪ ಅದು ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ತಗೋಬೇಕು ಇನ್ನೂ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಕೇಳ್ಕೊಡುದು ಆ ಥರನ No, it is not like that. The modern students, they won't agree for that. But the thing is, even the ancients were not like that. They would always question. We have the Prashnopanishad. It starts with the Prashna, a question. We have the Kenopanishad, who says, interrogative. And I recently brought out a book called Mahasalya, which has 100 questions in the first chapter. 100 questions on cosmology. How did this Srishti happen? Where is Earth? How is it standing? What is the distance between this planet and that Surya? And why Chandra is important? What is meant by Darsha? What is Pavanamasa? These are the questions, 100 questions. And the second chapter tends to answer, that is all kind of an astronomical thing relating with the Vedas. So it is the Vedanga book actually. It is the Jyotisha Vedanga. I will not go into that. But what I want to say is, it is the questioning attitude which is important. When my previous book, some of you know about Rodam Narasimha. Parashara Tantra was released by Rodam Narasimha. There are also questions in that book. He mentioned that it is the questioning which is more important. The question there, it comes up even in the Brihat Samhita. The student asks, the Guru, Kaushika asks his Guru, we see so many Jyotish, in the Jyotish Chakra, many things are going up, the celestial bodies. But I see one in the south, and that is not going with the sun. Can you tell me what is that? It's the question. And what he is asking is about Agastya. Agastya is star Canopus, which is in the south. And Agastya is also a Rishi, that is another matter. And our ancient, if you see, in the Vedic text, clearly say, Saptarshaya Agastyascha Nakshatre Shamkrito Avasantaittiri Aranyata. That is repeated day in and day out in most of the temples to this day. That is, they identified the celestial bodies with also the human rishis. Maybe because they identified it first, or they thought it is the most important. In other words, there is always a connection between the sky and the earth, the Prithvi and the Dyauh in our thing. Dyauh Pita, Prithvi Mata is the mantra. So that is how our culture is developed. And this culture, you can say it is useful as an ideal for sustainable development, because Prithvi is my Mata. You are not going to exploit like in the Christian principles that earth is created for the enjoyment of the humans, so you can keep on exploiting like what the Protestants would do. That is how the Protestantism started and all That is not our approach. Now, I'm not going into the political issues and the modern sociological issues. I want to come back once again to my interest with Manusmriti, why I was interested in historically. Now, Nitin has done a wonderful job with the first four shlokas. His introduction is very good. He has discussed in very great detail, and he wants to position himself, I mean, as I see as an author, from a person who is writing this, who is looking at his own culture from the Emic perspective, as he uses the same word. That word is very interesting, is the Emic perspective. We have to see our history from an Emic perspective. It is all right. Read so many history books written by Winternates, Arnold Toynbee, and all that. Okay, fine. But can we see from our own perspective? If you have to do that, what I have to do? I have to read the books which are in Sanskrit because they are the ancient books. No point in reading a book in English and telling he did like that. Buller wrote something wrong. Olivelle writes something else. Now Pingree writes something else. True, we read all of them to understand the perspective, the global perspective. That is the etic perspective, outsider perspective, but that have an insider perspective. In that, if you go back to the history that I was talking about, the questions, when did Krishna Avatara happen? When did Rama Avatara happen? We get into trouble. There is no unique answer for that. But were they historical? Yes, they were historical. How do you show that? One thing which comes to our head is the concept that Gyau Pita. In all through the Vedas, there are celestial bodies. And it is not my interpretation. Our ancients, for example, in the Nirukta, Yaska has said that Somo Chandrama. Soma is not just the herb which they will shake and drink in the Soma Yaga. That may be one of the things. Soma is Chandrama in the Adidaivata Paksha. In the Adhyatmik Paksha, Soma is Manas in the Upanishads and all that. That is another thing. And in the Yatmika Paksha only, Soma is the herb, Oshadi Vishesha. And this kind of tripartite understanding is the key to our history. And if you see the Adidaivata Paksha, you get tremendous amount of astronomical issues. It is not that they wanted to do the modern astronomy in that sense, no. They had their perception as mantra drashtaras, they were talking about it. And in one of the cases, in one of the mantras, there is, it says, Indra, Ekada Trimshada Abhibat Somam, it says, Somam, Indro Somasya Kamaka in the 7th mandala. Indra drank 30 cups of Soma in one draught. Because Indra is the lover of Soma. It is a mantra in the Rigveda in the 7th mandala. And Sayanacharya Bhasha, you can read and all that. Yaska, he says, why that 30 has come up. Now, even today, in many of the yagas, in the Mahendrian Samana, they have to offer Soma in 30 cups. They make 30 cups and keep it as offer. Like we do for Krishna, you give some 10 upaharas in the, or in for Ganapati, Panchakajja, you give some 5 and things like that. Vedas have those numbers. Those numbers have extraordinary meaning. And numbers are beyond language, so to say. Because anybody will say 3 or 4, you don't need Sanskritam or English or whatever, you can imagine those things. And Sayanan, to cut this story short, he quotes the Nirukta, says, 30 is, it is the Soma, the Devatas drinking moon in the Krishna Paksha. Soma in the Adidaivata meaning is Chandra, and the Devatas drink Soma each day. In the Krishna Paksha, 15 Ahaha, 15 Ratri. Total it is 30. And it is Ekada, it is continuous, Avyava Chinnam. There is no discontinuity in that. That is the meaning. And that is the same thing continues in the Vishvedeva limit in the 10th mandala. Trinishata Trisahasrani Trimshacha Deva Namacha Saparyan. There, everybody, even in Delhi, I recently heard some talk which was reported that the decimal system was already in the Rig Veda because 3339, that number is there. What is that 3339? God only knows. But if you see that carefully, what is the Adidevata interpretation with the Dashapurnamasa Yaga, and the Dashapurnamasa and all those things come up only in the Shraut Sutras, and it is practiced even now. The Darshiki Vedi, which is curved like this, and people have ignored it totally for the last 4,000 years, that has an area of 3,339 angulas. That is not mentioned in the Shulva Sutra, but as with a calculator. I calculated and showed it comes to that. That is actually the Sauros cycle, because in the Krishna Paksha only, moon is taken by the Devatas. That comes with the Brahmana Purana. It is not that new anything I am telling. He says, every day, every kala, in a sequentially, in the Krishna Paksha only, the Devas drink, from the starting from the Purnima. So 3,339 into 2, 6,678 Tithis divided by 371 is 18, exactly 18 years Saro cycle. So if in a particular Purnima they knew that there was an eclipse, like what happened last Saturday, 18 years later, in the same nakshatra, it is the same Nordic period, it is going to happen, the same anomaly, it is going to happen. And that is already encoded there. So if you see history in this perspective, you get an awful lot of information. Not only information, we can link with all these things. Coming back to Manusmriti, why I was interested in it, there are many historical information, very, very valid. In fact, he has taken only the first 4. The 5th one, he writes about it, in fact, in the introduction. It is cosmology. It's cosmology or cosmogony or cosmography, whatever you may call it. How did creation happen? Why worry about Rama Krishna? We will come to that later. Well, how did the creation happen? This creation comes up in almost many texts, many Puranas and all that. And later on, they also developed the Yuga concept in this. And the concept of Sanatana. Now, what is Sanatana? What is Yuga? From Dharma and all these things, we call ourselves Sanatanis. Now, there is a big, quarrel going on that, whether it is Hindu Dharma, it should be Sanatana Dharma, it should be called and all that. Sanatana means eternal and all that. How is it eternal? Now you see, here also later on it says for the Dharmikas, the actions are Sankalpa based. If you want to do something, there is a shloka on that Sankalpa. Sankalpa is something which all of us do. You say, if you are doing a puja, the pujari will come and say, you say this, Adya Brahmana, Dvitiya Parade, Shvetalpe, Vayusvata Manvantre, Kalyuge, Pratme Pade, Jambudvipe, then Shatabde, Mero, Dakshinapa. All these things, that is part and parcel of Dharma. Even the Vidhan Sauda people do that. They may not like all of that, but they are also the ministers because it is a social thing. It is not limited to only some Brahmanas or whatever. It is not like that. What is contained in that? They have not seen the meaning. That is history. But the history that starts with Shatabda. Shaka is only 70, 80 AD. Now, how do you call it Sanatana? The 70, 80 is Shaka. You may call it Vikrama. In the north, I know some people use the Vikram Samvat in their Sankalpa, but it is 57 BC, that's all the difference. Now, there is also Kali Yuga and all that in that. So, that is what we call the chronology. When the Kali Yuga started 3067 BC, that is another matter. Maybe that's how they have taken. And 3067 BC is not something extraordinarily ancient, it is not. Because we know that Harappans and that period was only 2500 BC. Today we know that very well. Because from C14 dating and all that, there was already a culture in India, learned urban culture, which was also had some rituals around that period. So Kali Yuga being around 3000 is not something extraordinarily difficult to prove. It is not. Vedas come to our help. Again the Aranyaka. There is a Shishumara mantra. That Shishumara mantra, it starts with Bhur Prapadya, etc. Dharma Murdhanam, Yajno Hanuhu, Kratuhu, and then Vishnu Hridayam. Then it comes Abhayam Chaturtham, Divya Shakvara Shishumara. Please see what Sarayana says about it. It is the Dhruva Mandala, which every person, particularly the Dvijas, Dvija is not just planets. Let us be very clear on that. Whoever can have this is a Dvija. They have to look at the northern sky, Dhruva Mandala, and then do the Gayatri Upasthana. Gayatri is actually a sun worship. We'll come to that in another 2 minutes. I will come to that. Now, this Dhruva, if you question from the modern perspective, the present day Dhruva was not the Dhruva in the Taittiriya Aranyaka period. Present day Dhruva is only the modern Dhruva, which if you see the Siddhantic astronomy text, they will clearly say it is the Dhruva Matsya, not Shishumara. But if we see Shankaracharya's Vishnu Sahasranama Bhashya, he says, Nakshatra Nagar Nakshatri iti Vyakhyana, he says, Shishumarsa Puche Dhruva Stitha Tasya Hrudi Vishnuhu, Vishnu Hrudi Miti Shrutihi, he writes. It's the Vedantic interpretation of all the three acharyas, not only Shankara, the other ones. Everybody agrees to that. Who is that Divya Shakshara Shishumara? That is today the astronomers would call Draco. The Alpha Draconis was the pole star in 2800 BC. I have written on this, it's published, so it's available open for anyone to see. So 2800 and 3000 they are very near. Now that is a historical anchor point which the Vedas give us. They don't say the number 2800. That we work out from our perspective. Then later on comes, okay, so you can see that Mahabharata also talks about Dhruvasya Prachalanam. So they knew about some Dhruva when it's moving, it's a bad woman, whatever you may say. So they are all historical. So you can fix up some time for them also. And even in the Brahmanda Purana, there are astronomical statements which are recently worked out, which goes to 1700 BC. It says where the Kritika Nakshatra was, then 1/4 of Kritika, there was a full moon, and that full moon matched with the Vishuva. And similarly, in the 3/4 Vishaka, there was the equinox occurred, there was a full moon. Equinoctial full moons are very rare. I will not go into all those details. We have worked on that. That goes to 1700 BC. So these are things with which you can construct our history. But in the Sankalpa, you can say there is one more before the Kali Yuga. Ditiya Pararde, Vaivasvata Manvantare, what is it? You say something of this kind. How did it come up? Is it important for us? Yes. It is important for the Dharmikas because the Vedas say that. Where does Vedas say that? Maitrayani Upanishad, Maitrayani Aranyaka says, Suryo Yoni Kalasya. Surya is the starting point for time. And there are two types of time, Kala and Akala. Kala means what? It comes from Kala. Kala Shabda and Vriddhi and Kala is Kala. What is Kala? Parts. The time is made out of parts. We all know time only through parts, whether it is a minute or hour or day, only through this we know. But before that, before sun, it was Akala. There was no division. And you see that this concept is taken up over all of this. And it also says, Yo kalam brahmi vipasita kalaha tasya duram abasarati. That is the Upanishad and the Aranyaka. I am not telling anything new. They want Kala to be worshipped as Brahma. Kala is the final thing. We also say, yes sir, in Ujjaini, no Kala, and the Prime Minister came there to inaugurate about time measurement. Fine. But why don't you relate it to the history? Now, the Puranas and even the Dharmashastra, Manu, they are all aware of this, very well aware of this. So their time concept has to start from sun, because it is the Ahargana which was the earliest counting. Day counting we all do. The sunrise I can do. Even today we will say, if you see the Panchanga people, sunrise to sunrise has to be taken as 30 Muhurta or 60 modern Ghatika they would say. Or 24 hours in the modern way. This is from the Vedas. Nothing new. The Trimshat and all these things are even in the Vedas. Not going to those details. So from sunrise to sunrise was the counting. And they thought about when sun might have been created and all that. Now, why did they do this? And why did the concept of praya and those things come up, the yugas come up? Obviously, it is because of the Saraswati river drying up. Now, Saraswati river dried up, we know, around 2000 BC or so. And this Kanda Purana, the Prabhas Kanda, is whole about 1000 shlokas only on the drying up of river Saraswati, but in a very, very picturesque way, that it burned and there were some things happened. So some Rakshasas came, they wanted to, so many things are there. I have written on that, but it is all about disaster. And he also says the Kalagni is what the Vedavadis are telling us, Kalagni, Rudraya, Nilakantaya, Mahadevaya. It is all burning there in the Prabhasa Kshetra. Prabhasa is not modern Somanatha. This Prabhasa is somewhere near Run of Kutch, Irina region, where there is a volcanic thing, like a Nakatrana, which is like a volcano. Even today you can go and see that. Modern people also agree these are all in ancient period volcanoes and all that. There is no question of that. But how did these people know? They would have questioned. They might not, as modern astronomers, gone there with their seismographs and made measurements. But they thought about it. Vedas don't say when it happened. Vedas give some clues. Historically, 1800 BC was the Magadhi period and all that, even in the Aranya. But the Puranic people and the Manu, my feeling is this text belongs something like a pre-Puranic period. If the Puranas have started somewhere from in the Gupta period, as the usual thing to say, this would be prior to that. Reason is it belongs to a class of text, this text, which doesn't know Rashi, which doesn't know weekdays. If the weekdays and Rashis are not known, that's the Mesha Vrishabha difference. It belongs to the period of Kautilya's Arthashastra, Bharata's Natya Shastra, and the Narada Shilpa Shastra, which I have edited, because they don't know these things. Some of them they don't know even about Tithi. They only about Nakshatra and Karana. Narada Shilpa only knows about Nakshatra and Karana. So they all go to that previous period, which is the Dharma Sutra period, or the Grihya Sutra period, about 500 BC or maybe more than that, prior to that. This talks about Sanatana, this talks about that, the Vyutpatti also, like Tamo Bhutam Aprajnatam. The same is what comes in the Rigveda, and same as in the Rediscovering Jyotisha Mahasayanam, which I recently edited. It talks about a big split. Even the Puranas talk about it. But they all combine and they give extra stories. And this is an interesting thing because the stories, if you make it mathematical and give us equations, they will be forgotten and they put in the waste paper basket. But if you retain it as a story, that story may be what you may call asat. And the Vedantis will talk of sadasat, vastu, viveka and all kinds of big things. All the sat is always covered with an asat. Like my plantain is covered with chilka outside, It is up to you what you want to eat. That is a different matter. So you can take this sat. The stories, the akhyanas, even in the Brahmana text, like the Soma legend and all of that, Soma Rohini legend, Soma loving only, staying with only Rohini. Vrudadagi Jyotish gives an astronomical explanation for all of that. I will not go into those things. And that is an important thing in historically taking, that it is in Indian history, the concept, the ideology, or our people thought of history, our past, from the birth of sun. And that is the differentiation between Paravidya and Aparavidya. Now, Paravidya may be the Upanishad and all of those things which are accessible to beyond the Indriyas. Whereas the Aparavidya, as we know, it is the intellectual thing. So we are interested only in the intellectual thing. So when you come to the intellectual thing, you need time measurement. And that is from sun. So Surya Yonihi Kalasya is the correct thing, and from there only all life started. Now, is it discussed in detail? You may say, this is all prehistory, moderns would say. You are going to Cenozoic period, you are going to Proterozoic period. We have that also. There are concepts in the Purana. It is not 1,000 years before the sun happened. It is not in 4000 BC the creation happened. It was 2.3 billion years ago. 2.3 billion years ago, sun was created in the Swayambhuva Manvantara. And in the Chakshusha Manvantara, part of sun fell in the Irna region, as a Ran of Kutch region, in the Prabhasa. That is what the Puranas say. How did they know that time? I don't know. They might have imagined or they might have got. There are some other clues given to that in the Puranas. It will take me into too much of time about precision of the earth, the Dhruva moving, and the legend with Dhruva. I will not do that. And in between, you may ask what happened to them. 2.3 billion years, up to the Saraswati river drying about 2000 BC. That's all inculcated in our Dharma. We worship Saligrama. Saligrama is Vishnu. We don't need any special pratishtha for that. Saligrama is Amonite. What does science say? It is about 200 million years ago the Ammonites formed. Fine. So you can say Vishnu Avatara also in a life form happened 250 million years ago. They knew that. So that is how they have tried to link the Anadikala or the Sanatanatva. Now, Saligrama is, you may say, no sir, this is only in the Garuda Purana, it is not in the Veda, I agree. But there is a similarity. Because all of our culture is based on a self-similarity, it's a Samya. Because Swayambhuva, he occurred on his own and he created Bhrigu and all others in a self-similar way. Veda itself says it is the self-similar way. It is like similar triangles and all that. Now, self-similarity is a very important principle today, as we know, a chaos and those things, the structures. But they had known this by direct perception, perhaps, and that is how they created. Now, Vedas, where do you get any information between the Saraswati river and that? It is again the Aranyaka. You know that in all the yagas, they have to keep below some 5 sambharas. The details I will not go into. In fact, even some people say a human head has to be kept and all that, maybe some other things. But one of the important things is Valmika Vapa. Valmika Vapa has to be kept in the Soma Yaga, the Agni Chayana, Agnyadana, Agnishtoma. Whenever you have the Vedic Agni, you have to keep that. Why? The mantra is there. Devihi Vamrirasya Bhutasya Pratamajaratavarihi. Taittiriya Aranyaka mantra. This Vamri is the oldest on this earth. Pratamajaratavarihi. Asya Bhutasya Pratamajaratavarihi. Now, modern scientists will say, no, sir, no. It is you are telling about termites. They are older than cockroach, we know that, but it may go up to about 600 million years. Fine. Right. When sun is 2.3 billion years ago, now this should not matter for me. But the issue, the point that you have to see is our history, epistemologically you want to establish, go back to sun. It is the sun which is the important thing, and that is why Surya Upasana is mentioned, and I will not go into the other issues. And you would see our villages. Many of, I'm sure you would have seen in Bangalore, I'm happy with it, even though this is a very cosmopolitan, modern town. There are villages, because all these were villages, they will be standing in a corner, looking at sun and doing like this. I'm sure you would have seen this. Many people do even in our houses and all that. It is the sun worship, Surya Upasana, because the Vedas say everything started with the sun. Now, thank you so much. Manu also upholds that. So his Sanatana, which comes up, the definitions and all that, they are all right. They are all belong to the same system. The Puranic, the Dharmic system, and the Sanatana system. So I wish Nitin all the best with this book further.
Thank you everyone for coming to this launch of this Chatushloki Manusmriti. I want to just share a bit about how I came to write the book and what it is about. and why you should read it perhaps. I think even 10, 12 years back, I did not know much about Manusmriti. I might have heard the name here and there, but never gave much thought to it. My journey itself, I should say, it started long back when I was in high school. It started with Western philosophy and me kind of becoming an atheist. So the journey began as an atheist, but spiritual seeker or a philosophical seeker, so to speak, to eventually being a kind of a intellectual gharvapsi, so to speak. So this happened because I have always been, very, very interested in philosophical truths, to questions this: who am I? What is the reality of the world? And such questions. And eventually, at some point, I realized a very great difference between the Western philosophy and Indian philosophy or Indian darshanas is that the Western philosophy is basically different philosophers seeking the truth through speculation, rational analysis, and many other things. But Indian darshanas are based on a more surer footing, more surer foundation in the form of the Shabda Pramana we have, the Veda, the Itihasa Puranas. So we are not somebody who is groping in the dark. Our rishis have already given us the eternal truths, that on the basis of which we have to rediscover them, and on the basis of which we can live out a more meaningful life. So this kind of this strong conviction, when I realized it, so that was kind of a beginning point of more serious engagement with our Sanatana Shastra tradition, and initially it began with Vedanta and other things. But 10 years ago, when I was working on my book Menstruation Across Cultures, researching on the topic of menstruation, so it was in the backdrop of the Shabarimala controversy that happened. And one of the narratives, the discourse was that in Hindu Dharma as a whole, women are looked down upon because of menstruation. So that is a very prominent narrative that, even in the ads, you open YouTube videos, there are hundreds of videos you will get which says that busting taboos about menstruation, and they say all these are superstition, all the traditional practice are superstition, they degrade women and such things. So I wanted to find out what is the truth about that. What does our core beliefs as a Hindu is. So as I started researching where I can find the basis of our practice, I of course found the Vedic references in the Taittiya Samhita, etc. But the majority of the references and elaborations were actually in two kinds of texts. One was the Dharmashastra, the Smriti Shastras, the other was Ayurveda. So it was that time then that I came across Manusmriti and similarly other Smritis, and I realized this is a genre of text which is of deep importance to us today, because they are the texts, just like we have, if you want to study physics, we have to refer to physics textbook. So if you want to study about Dharma, then we have to study Dharmashastra. So the name Dharmashastra itself, Shastra is any systematic treatise. So you cannot speak about Dharma, discuss about Dharma without taking into consideration the Dharmashastra. So it will no longer be a Dharma discussion if you simply put the Dharmashastra into a discipline. So this realization made me to research more on Dharma, the primary sources including Manusmriti. And more I studied, more I realized its importance, especially on burning matters today, from ecological disaster that is happening to the contemporary challenges posed by, say, for example, AI, cloning, or cultural controversial issues such as temple freedom or whether the age of marriage should be increased or the abortion debate, any and every kind of socio-cultural civilization issues. The Dharmashastras have very meaningful things to bring to the table. So if you want to establish a Hindu Renaissance or revive Hindu civilization or build Indian grand narrative, a Hindu drishti, a worldview on things, then Dharmashastra, study, engagement and further building upon that is a must. You cannot do that without that. So Dharmashastra, as I see it is one of the 14 Vidyasthanas enumerated in Mahabharata, and it is inseparable part of Indian knowledge system, inseparable part of our Jnana Parampara, Shastra Parampara, and we cannot have Hindu drishti, our own Bharatiya drishti, worldview on things without that. Currently, what we are doing is, we have been doing for the last few decades is to cut, copy and paste. So you copy the problem from the West and then copy the solution from the West. So both the problem and the solution are alien, so we are in a mess. So the only alternative in the long term is that we cannot be free. I mean, we call ourselves independent and we celebrate independence every year, but that is only a political independence. Even that is also in many quarters very doubtful how politically we are free. But that's a different debate. But we are not intellectually free. We are still colonized. We are still, we are still thinking, talking, discussing, and arguing based on the ideas that were implemented in us by our colonial masters. So, if you want to be free, then there is only one way, that is to revival of Dharma traditions, revival of Sanatana Dharma in all its dimensions, and one important such dimension is Dharmashastra and engagement with it. And with this background, I just want to add few more things about the book. Why Manusmriti? Why this book? If you see for the last few thousand years, purely from say inscriptional evidences, etc., you will see many kings giving their inscriptions and all. You will see that the kings are praised as following a Manu, or they have been praised, or they mention some shlokas from Manusmriti. In the Veda itself says that whatever Manu says is like a medicine. That is, it is bitter when you try to engage with it. But eventually, if you hold on to it, you will realize its true value. So I think that is where we are today. For the last few decades, we are in the bitter stage, and we are yet to emerge into seeing their true value because of a lot of chaos and confusions. So Manusmriti has been, whether we like it or not, implicitly in the background, a kind of a civilizational document throughout history for whole Sanatana Dharma. And its influence is very, very visible how even outside India, in the Southeast Asia and all, the achara, the legal structures, they all were inspired by Manusmriti. So we have a lot of confusions today about the nature of Manusmriti, the nature of the Smriti literature. Is it a law book in the sense of constitution or IPC's legal code, or is it a book of religion such as the Bible, which was hegemonically implemented by church kind structure? But the answer is, it is neither. It is a textbook, as I said. It is a book of knowledge. It is to put it in a Shastriya language, it is a Pramanashastra. Its purpose is to reveal knowledge. How we use that knowledge, how we engage with it, whether we burn it, whether we abuse it, whether we only create controversy, or whether we want to take good thing out of it or something relevant out of it for us today to deal with our challenges. It is all our responsibility. So it is simply blaming one single book for every ill of a society. The loss is ours, not the books, because ultimately, as a Pramana Shastra, whatever the eternal aspect it is teaching, it will remain valid. Even if you replace Manusmriti with the Shukra Niti in your in your university textbooks, the knowledge will remain same, because ultimately even Shukra Niti will go back to Manusmriti. All Dharmashastra tradition goes back to Manusmriti, goes back to Swayambhava Manu, as Sir was saying, all our civilization goes back to Surya Bhagwan. So it is like that. The Purusha in the Surya is Satya Brahma, says our Upanishads. The Purusha there is Parabrahma himself. And all knowledge goes back to the Parabrahma. And Manu is the son of, mind-born son of Brahma. So again, so Dharma all goes back there. So you cannot avoid it in one way or the other. If you want, it's better to engage in a meaningful way with open-mindedness and open-heartedness. Not that we have to accept everything, not that we have to agree with everything, not that we have to glorify everything, but we have to have at least a sincere, honest engagement to see what, how we can utilize the knowledge that has been revealed to us. And one such attempt has been made in this book. Sir was asking, you wrote 4 verses, when will you write the entire book? And many people have expressed this, including late Dr. Vivek Devaraj. He said in his foreword, and otherwise also he mentioned, please do try to write a commentary for the entire book. I said, sir, if Bhagavati willing, it will happen in this life. I don't know. But why 4 verses? Why is it important? Because it is not a random picking of 4 verses, it is an opening 4 verses. And the reason it has been picked is it teaches about Anubandha Chatushtaya, about the object, purpose, utility of Dharmashastra. So it is a kind of a gateway to understand. Before we study something, we have to know what we are studying, what is Dharma, who is it written for, what is the perspective to approach the text. So without these basics being clear, such as whether it is a law book, or it is a Brahmanashastra, whatever it is, so no amount of study or engagement will be useful, because otherwise we will always be, assuming and superimposing our own fantasies, our own expectations, our own biases on the book, and making either positive or negative judgments. So to avoid that, to have a more sincere engagement, it is very important to understand what the text is about. It is telling us the Vishaya, it is telling us the Adhikari, it is telling us the Prayojana. So we have to root ourselves in this knowledge only when to take up any serious engagement with that text. I hope all of you will read the book, and hope it will be meaningful to you. And my request is read it, share it with others, rate it on the Amazon, comment it there, share with your friends and family, everybody. Thank you very much.
I think Professor Iyengar and Nathan have talked a lot about, listening to Professor Iyengar was going back in time, centuries, millennia ago. I will share a few thoughts about this book. One is that it is very important for us to be telling our own history, for us to be reinterpreting or interpreting our own history. If we don't do that, someone else will. And there are no scholars, if I were to use the word, there are no scholars who come free of their biases. Biases can be good, biases can be bad. In the case of Western scholars, we know where the biases come from, what those biases are, but in the absence of any contradictory or evidence or response from our side, it's only one voice that gets the space and the mind share. In the very opening of your book, Nathan, you talk about one controversy or one confusion over the number of shlokas in the Manusmriti. The generally accepted number is 4,000, the traditional number is 4,000, but the text actually contains about 2,864 or roughly thereabouts shlokas. This discrepancy is then used to attack the very foundation of the Manusmriti as a patchwork of sources collected over the years, over the millennia. For whatever reason one can speculate, but one of the purposes is to throw doubt on the entire tradition of scholarship of Hinduism, of Sanatana Dharma. One of the scholars who mentions this and talks about this, and you mentioned this I think on page 5, is the great Wendy Doniger.
Oh.
The greatest Wendy Doniger. Now, just so you know what kind of a tradition Wendy Doniger comes from, and there is Sri Rajiv Malhotra, there is Aditi Banerjee who have written about her, but She calls, if I go to page 5, she basically says this is a patchwork and it has contradictions that may indeed be ultimately insoluble, and different parts of the text were added at different periods. And this is not an isolated incident. She has used this for the Mahabharata also. She called the so when the critical edition of the Mahabharata as a project was taken up almost 90 years back by the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, it basically served many purposes. One of them was the fact that it saved the Mahabharata from mutilation by Western scholars who were insistent and who wanted to find Aryan roots in the Mahabharata, and anything that was religious in it was considered an extrapolation, a Brahmanical interpolation by the Bhrigu clan to insert the Bhrigu lineage into the Mahabharata. So the critical edition served one purpose there. The second one is that it collected in one place, perhaps for the first time, all the major recensions that existed or were collected by the Bhandarkar Institute, and they were put as part of the critical apparatus, which meant that any scholar that wanted to see what had been excluded from the critical edition, for example, could simply consult the critical apparatus. Having lost out on the opportunity of mutilating the Mahabharata and recrafting it to their agenda, it didn't go down too well with those Western scholars, Wendy Doniger being one example, and she called it, I forget the exact words, but a monstrous chaos or something to that effect. Simply because they couldn't mutilate the Mahabharata, the frustration came out in other means. That same template has been applied by Wendy Doniger and others to the Manusmriti. And just in passing on, in conclusion, if you were to ask me about Wendy Doniger, why do you have such animus towards her? Not at all. I'm sure she is a fine scholar, or at least she thinks she's a fine scholar. She's the one who said that, okay, how many of you studied geography in your class, in school? All of you, I hope. You all saw a map of India?
Yes.
You know what the equator is? Is India above or below the equator?
Above.
Above the equator. If you look at Kanyakumari, that is about 900 kilometers above the equator. If you look at Point Indra, which is a part of the islands of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, it is about 400 kilometers north of the equator. The shape of the earth has been changing, continents have been moving. You have to go back about 30 million years ago before you found any part of modern India south of the equator. And yet, Wendy Doniger, when she wrote the book Hindus and Alternative History, she wrote that most of India is in the northern hemisphere. Most of India, which meant that she believes that there are parts of India that are south of the equator. This is a person who's considered a scholar. So I will leave it at that. Why I think Wendy Doniger is her PhD should have been revoked on grounds of incompetence and malfeasance, but that's a different topic. So which is why it is important for Indian scholars, Indic scholars to study, interpret and comment on the Manusmriti from an Indic lens. It is a Sanatana text. The first and foremost right to comment on it belongs to us, not to others. People like it or not, that's another matter, but the right is ours. In the absence of people exercising that right, others will comment on it, and that is what has been happening. Nitin Sridhar's book, I think, is a welcome addition to that. Now, you do talk about the fact that this is while you have, I think, several pages on each of the first 4 shlokas, but it is a tradition that you have followed in calling it the Chatu Manushloki. But it does talk about the entire Manusmriti, Manusamhita, in great detail. The first 2/3 of the book, if you were to read it, is on the Manusmriti itself. The next, the appendices are the ones that talk about certain other topics, for example, about the role of Varna in Hindu society, the alternative distortions, misinterpretations. For example, in Appendix 2, you talk about Sri Surendra Kumar's revisionist take interpretations, and I think there are 6 points that he makes and that you rebut. So all of those add to the value of the book because it helps us understand not only the book but some of the ways in which people have tried to put forth their own misinterpretations. This again is not unique to the Manusmriti, much reviled the text as it is, even when it comes to the Mahabharata. There was scholarship, if I use the word in a very loose manner, scholarship that came and said that the entire Mahabharata is not actually based on actual events, it is an imaginary tale, and there was no Yudhishthira, no Krishna, no, and it is all a person's imaginary tale. There are two controversial, so-called controversial shlokas that you also examine, and you can find them on page 71. And you do talk about, and they essentially, when you talk about the Manusmriti, and the usual criticism is that it is the favorite buzzwords of the woke crowd, the woke mafia, is that it is a Brahmanical patriarchal text. These are the usual buzzword lingo that they employ. The same, then, if you look at the Manusmriti, there are two shlokas that are often taken up, and you talk about them. You list them out on page 71 along with the translation, the Sanskrit text and the translation, that a woman in childhood should remain under the control of her father, and youth under that of her husband, and on the husband's death under that of her sons, the woman should never have recourse to independence, and so on. Let's see, there are enough instances, let's pick one. The Mahabharata says that the enemy should be killed wherever they are, doesn't matter whether you follow Dharma or not. Now, if I take that one shloka in isolation, I can make the case that the Mahabharata is not a text about Dharma, it is actually a text about Dharma, which is also the title of a book that Wendy Gallagher wrote, again, my favorite historian, who said, interestingly enough, in the US it was published under the title Against Dharma, which is and outside the US and India it was published under the name Beyond Dharma. But coming back to the selective interpretations, that particular shloka from the Mahabharata that I talked about has been uttered by Duryodhana. So if I remove the context, I can come up with any interpretation that suits my biases. Obviously, any scholar will tell you, if on the other side, that that is not an honest way of examining any kind of a text. But when they do it, it is kosher. In the context of those two shlokas from the Manusmriti, Nitin talks about them for several pages. And the nature of dharma for a man is different from that of a woman. And I quote that he writes on page 73 that while men in general are more suited for karma yoga, in general, so it is not a sweeping generalization, lest people pick up isolated examples as exceptions and use them to argue against the general principle that while men in general are more suited for karma yoga in its aspect of austerity, that is tapasya, and ritual performance, which is karma anusthana, women in general are more suited for karma yoga with a stress on devotion, that is bhakti, and service. There's a context to everything. What I'll conclude with is that, first of all, I think this is a very seminal book. I doubt in these age and times many people are going to actually read the Manusmriti or the translation, because it runs into 4,000 shlokas, is going to run into several hundred pages. I doubt people are going to read that. In the absence of that, it is important that not in Sanskrit, not in Kannada, not in an Indic language, but I think it is important for a book like this to come out in English. Because whether we like it or not, we accept it or not, the narratives are set using the English language. The counter, the rebuttal to those narratives, therefore, also has to be in English in today's times. It doesn't mean that we abandon Indic languages, but we have to recognize the growing reality. You mentioned Sri Vivek Debroy, Swargya Vivek Debroy's beautiful handcrafted letter that he had shared in appreciation of your book. He had also made this point when he came out with those with his unabridged translations, was that it is important to write in English because modern audiences, Hindu readers, are more and more gravitating towards English. Knowledge of Sanskrit has been diminishing over the last several decades. It is an unfortunate reality. If it changes, well and good. If it doesn't, we need to have our voice in the English language also. Lest anyone say that you cannot talk about colonization and decolonization and yet write in English. We are not talking about English as a means of expressing our cultural thoughts as much as a means, English as a means of communicating and reaching a broader audience. So my appreciation to Nitin for giving me this opportunity, this invitation, my pleasure in having heard Professor Iyengar. I learned more in that half an hour than I would have in more than a year of studying or maybe a lifetime of studying. So my sincere thanks to you and thank you all for coming.
I would request Dr. Sai Susula to address us and say what his impressions about the book are.
What I found the most striking about this effort to put forward Manusmriti is how do you interpret statements from Sampradaya perspective, okay? And there may be a Sampradaya perspectives also, let them be there. But it is very important to lay out how to interpret a statement from what does it mean to interpret a statement from a Sampradayic perspective. Sampradayic means like what you mentioned, Emic perspective. How does the tradition look at Nastri Swatantramadai? It's a very famous statement which has been pummeled by people from all the everybody who talks about Manusmriti says this is the most backward because Nastri Swatantramadai. Woman does not, the translation is woman does not deserve independence. It is the English translation of Nastri Swatantramadai. But the traditional understanding of that phrase, of the sentence, how the tradition, if you don't know how to interpret a statement according to the Shastra, you will get into these misinterpretations like converting anhati to deserve. That's a wrong translation. And I'm giving this as one example. There are many examples of how particular statements or incidents from either referred by the Manusmriti or peripheral to the concept of Manusmriti that Nitinji goes into a lot of detail. Before you jump into 2000 slokas, you don't have to read all the 2000 slokas. If you know how to read, then you can read the 2000 slokas by yourself. You don't need Nitinji to give you a full book of translating Manusmriti for you. What Nitinji has done is given you the methodology of how to interpret Manusmriti. If you know how to read, it's like you know how to fish. You will survive for a lifetime. If you know only eating a fish, you can only survive as long as you have the fish in your hand. Okay. My understanding is what Nitinji has done is provide the methodology of interpretation of a traditional grantha from traditional perspective. What is the method of interpreting? What is the method of understanding? What is the contextual background behind statement? How to ask the right questions so that you arrive at the correct understanding of the text. That he has given multiple, numerous examples in this book that I found very, very important. Actually, like Varna, for example, Varnas, he has given multiple layers of understanding of Varnas and quoting all the bhashyas, what they say about that particular word. The most controversial and so-called denigrating word and that all these modern guys put down Indian system is Varna. Okay, you guys have stratified the society, but actually what is the interpretation in reality? That is what Nitinji has done excellently in this book. See, there is a sampradaya of discourse in our system. When you say, there is a statement, you quote a response, there is a methodical approach to how you respond. The methodical approach is first you understand the linguistic concept, then you bring in the contextual as, then you quote what sishtas, the sishta means the well-respected authority say about that, okay, and then you do a samanvaya, the consolidated understanding. So there is a standard methodology of addressing an issue in the Shastric tradition. That approach Nitinji has expressed in the modern language of English. That is done. Why? Because it will make that rigorous understanding accessible to those who do not know Sanskrit. And that is our Gen Z. Okay. So this approach, I am sure, will inspire our younger generation to see the what I call as the rigorous perspective of knowledge pursuit of India. This book gives you a glimpse into that systematic approach to knowledge pursuit of India. And it doesn't matter actually. I recommend Nitinji not to write 2000 Manusmriti slokas. That's a waste of time and an insult to the intelligence of the readers. If you tell them how to read, they should read it by themselves. Okay? You don't have to again do the same interpretation for every one of those 2000. What you have done is what I call as the firm foundation. This is enough for the rest. And one major recommendation I have, this book must be consumed and interpreted by ChatGPT, because most of our youngsters today, when they want to understand any concept, they go to ChatGPT and ask. And today what ChatGPT is trained with, it is trained with Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is fed by the sishyas of Wendy Dominic. So what you will get in interpretation by ChatGPT about Varna is naturally the discriminatory social practice of India for millennia. That is exactly what you will get when you type what is Varna in ChatGPT. And there is no counter statement to that. This is the most unfortunate thing. because all the people who write in English are studying from the same old rut. Okay, and that is the data that ChatGPT learns from. It is extremely important for traditional interpretation to also be fed into ChatGPT so that at least the alternative is made available. So, but this is a problem because unless the data is freely available, ChatGPT cannot pick it up. But we want Nikunji to survive. So, how do we solve this? My suggestion: we want to create an online library of Sanatana interpretations of Sanatana Dharma. Make it behind a paywall. Let this book be not available in public, but make it available to be crawled by AI. Not make the content fully open, but crawling let it so that when a youngster like my daughter asks what is Varna, in side by side with Bendy Donegal, there should also be an interpretation that says Varna as explained by Shankara, Varna as explained by Manusmriti and Parasis, and how to interpret. What is the methodology of understanding? All that also becomes available to the youngsters. Okay, so I want to create a Indic knowledge paid library, but indexed free. If they want to read more, you have to pay. Sure, that's okay. So you get your money, but you are also doing a service to the younger generation. The younger generation today are fed with knowledge which is not traditionally backed, and it is extremely important for content like this to be made available. That's one. The second recommendation is what I don't blame Nitinji for that, but what he has done is I told you about a methodology of discourse, Shastric methodology of discourse. That is a very hierarchical approach to organizing knowledge. What is the source? What is the linguistic understanding? What is the Shishta understanding, expert understanding? What is the Bhashyas? And then comes the consolidation. There is that is called in the technical terminology, you can organize a discourse which is currently in the form of flat text as a structure that will help process the information in a much more assimilable way. I'm a technical guy. I don't want to go too much technical, but I want to interpret, I want to rearrange the content of this book in a more shastrically organized way, which will help in its interpretation and crawling by the AI tools of the world in a much more relevant manner. And we have developed such a technology. So how to present that as a knowledge network? Okay, knowledge network. How humans understand any book is they convert whatever they are reading into a thought network in their brain, and that network is not like reams and reams text. It is concepts and their linkages. It's a network. It is computer science people will understand it. It is a network of thought. That is what enables humans to quickly recollect information. If this book, such an important thing such as this book is also represented in that manner, it will dramatically help in educating the public about how to interpret Bharatiya knowledge, not only the four slokas, but the rest of the 2000. Because the real controversy of Manusmriti starts after the poem. That's where the fight will start. So you have to prepare them for that by telling them how to approach. So that's what I wanted to say. But to conclude, this is an amazing work, very much required in English, providing what the Shastra tradition has done in the language of English for the sake of Gen Z. If only if the same information is organized or presented in a more AI-friendly manner, its impact would be huge. That's what I want to say. Thank you.